Welcome back. Now, from a public show of political bromance to a big brother, small brother affection, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his arch-political rival Raila Odinga seem to be reading, if not are already reading, from the same political script, whose ink is laden with the 9th March handshake. Good evening. Tonight we start the Pundits Night, a political show that we hope will explain to you what happens more than just stating to you what is happening in the political field. Good evening once again. I'm Abu Bakr Abdullahi. Let me introduce my guests tonight. Herman Manyora, political analyst, a residential analyst as well for the show. We have Javas Bigambo, a governance expert. We have Omondi Oada, who is a political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you tonight for making time for us for the premiere episode of Pundits Night tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right, Herman Manyora, let me start with you. On the 9th of March 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga shook hands, what now proverbially is known as the handshake of 2018. Just for the context of this discussion, was that handshake at that time needed?
Tearing apart as a country. Some parts of this country were saying they were not going to be part of Kenya. And there was generally lack of peace and stability in the country. And therefore the handshake was more than welcome.
And when you say there was lack of peace in this country, was that lack of peace because a section of the political divide chose not to go with peace?
You know what happened was after the disputed elections of 2017, which actually ended in the Supreme Court and was annulled, and then there was a repeat election. Events that followed up to that 9th of March were not very pleasant events. You remember it was not even very, very secure being in town. Mm-hmm. You remember the riots, the demonstrations, the police harassment, and all those kind of things. The country was generally not peaceful. And I think that handshake was more than welcome, like I've said.
Let me bring Javas Bigambo, a governance expert, to the discussion. In a liberal democracy as such, where we have laws and the constitution, why peg the country's future into the hands of a few, if not two?
Well, each nation is always blessed with its own kinds of leaders who can steer it through the dynamics, the challenges of its times, depending on the kind of events in the prevailing issues in the journal of such time. Kenya has gone through very warped political moments, and it is because of the fluid nature of our politics, the adversarial and cutthroat kind of competition that we always have as a nation that has led us to where we are today. Mm-hmm. And while it may seem that our country today and its future squarely rests on the shoulders of two national leaders in the person and name of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, the success of such kind of initiative is not only dependent on the two. They need the support, the cooperation of other leaders as well and other citizens. So it must not be seen that the success, the prosperity of this nation is just dependent on the trust and the friendship between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, much as they are the core things who are steering this nation at this moment.
All right, let me bring Omondi Oada, who is a political analyst, to the discussion as well. Omondi, looking at what was happening then, Raila Odinga on the 30th of January 2018 swore himself, at least was sworn as the people's president, a country one would argue was in its knees politically. Did these political happenings at that time shape the outcome of what the handshake came out to be?
Yes, Abubakar, I agree with Javas that our political scenario at the moment called for the handshake. And anyone who lived in Kenya at that time recalls that the environment was so murky, business was coming down, everything was coming down, and any right-thinking leader would not have wanted to lead a country of that nature. And therefore, any right-thinking leader would require a peaceful environment for them to operate. The handshake itself was a good thing. It's only that it looks as if it has been hijacked by other forces that were not incorporated during the discussions that resulted in the handshake.
Omondi, you say the handshake itself was, the language you are using seemingly is that of a past tense. Has that changed now?
I think the original objectives of the handshake have already been surpassed by events. And I think that even President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Raila Odinga have forgotten about the handshake, and they are thinking about other future political occurrences that they have held into their chests. So I don't think that the objectives of the handshake are still as they were when they conceived.
All right, let me pose your thoughts as a question to Herman Manyora, a residential political analyst. Is it a case of the two duos now foregoing the handshake, as Omondi says?
Repeat it to me. I'm not hearing those two other gentlemen.
All right, Omondi Owada, who is a political analyst who is with us on the show, says both Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta have, as of now, forgotten about the handshake.
What would forgetting really mean? I wouldn't understand. I thought they were pursuing the handshake through BBI. And it'll be very interesting that they have forgotten. How will they have forgotten it? All the activities taking place in the country are about BBI. All the so-called fumigation in parliament and many other things are about BBI. If anything, on the contrary, they are really pursuing the handshake.
All right, Herman, is it ironically not the case then that this handshake that was launched as though it was a unity pact bringing the country together is also being blamed for the fallout between the president and his deputy?
You know, anytime you have something as monumental as the handshake, for indeed the handshake was monumental, when you have something this big, it surely has ramifications. It surely can't unite everybody. It surely can't make everybody happy. However good it is, the fact that it is this big and this monumental and this changing in terms of the political landscape is going to annoy a few people. It's certainly going to hurt a few people. And certainly a few people have been hurt. And for that reason, there will be people from the, say, the deputy president's side who are not happy with this handshake because they see it as that has come to stand in between them and what was all but assured as the president of 2022. So they wouldn't be happy. In fact, there are those who have argued instead of uniting the country, the handshake has kind of divided the country. Instead of that it is building some bridges while destroying others. That is not actually true. What is true is that something as big as a handshake will certainly have ramifications, will certainly hurt some people, will certainly make some people unhappy.
Herman, you say that, Herman, let me interject you at that point. You say that is not true. Observably from the political scene, we have seen the disquiet in the ruling party, in the president's own party itself, the Jubilee Party. We have seen the fractions that have hence emerged within this party. It seems as though it's true. There is a disquiet, disunity in the party that the president heads.
That's what I said. If you are the president of a country and you feel things are not going the way you want them to go, and you want to create order, the president has said is looking at 2020, at his legacy. He's looking at delivering on his promises to the people of the Republic of Kenya. And if there are people who are standing in the way of that, they wouldn't be happy with what he's going to do. So then if he's going to whip some people into line they wouldn't be happy. Even in your own, if you have a family, you are still a young man. But in a family, if things are not going well, and you want to bring discipline in the family, there will be some people in that family who may not be happy about it. They are used to their wayward ways. So if Jubilee decides that they want, going forward, to live up to what the president has wanted in terms of his legacy, in terms of delivering on his promises, in terms of development, in terms of maybe fighting corruption, if that is true, it will hurt some people, like I've said. It will injure some people. But what I'm saying is, what the president wants to do definitely will stand in the way of the ambition of certain characters. That is where the problem is. That is not disunity or disquiet. Definitely there will be issues. You can't do something as big as a handshake. You can't bring something as big and as life-changing as the BBI and expect everybody to sing and be happy. No, some people will be annoyed, and well, that's life.
All right, let me bring Javas to the discussion now. Javas, if charity begins at home, and this is a political charity, it seems as though it's not beginning in the house of the president.
Now you see, our politics is very, very interesting and dynamic. That even though we've got deep interest within us as a nation to fortify against certain constitutional, institutional, and political weaknesses that have always drawn us back to that animalistic instincts that make us go for each other's jugular, make us fail to trust each other's politicians, make politicians, the moment they are sent into political office, to change their hearts and minds against even that which they had promised the people. It is because of the inherent habit of mistrust that continues to grip even the ruling party today. That even though, for instance, when you look at the 9-point agenda, there is one of the aspects is inclusivity, responsibility, and yet the party that the president leads itself is a house divided, which is threatening not to stand long. That even the men and women that the president worked with to formulate that party, today they cannot see eye to eye. And I want
Javas, you say they can't. Javas, you say they can't see eye to eye. Is that not self-defeatist argument then, that the president wants to unite the country from this handshake, but that is not trickling down to his own party?
And that is the irony of it all. That the very essence of the 9-point agenda, the handshake, was to create a spirit of inclusivity, to heal or guard against divisive elections. We are not yet in the election period. Issues of shared prosperity, responsibility, fighting corruption. But what are we seeing today? We are seeing, in fact, the inverse of inclusivity within Jubilee. We're not seeing brotherhood and camaraderie within Jubilee as a party. Why is it, for example, that now there seems to be, actually not just seems, but there are factions within Jubilee? The faction allied to His Excellency the President, then the other faction allied to the Deputy President. We're not seeing the very spirit and the grain of inclusivity within Jubilee.
All right, Javas, you have made your point. Let me bring in Omondi to the discussion as well. The handshake, out of its byproduct, begot the BBI Building Bridges Initiative. The 14-member task force says it's ready with its report. Is it more apparent now that the question of a referendum will be the headline of this report?
That is true, Abubakar. A referendum is inevitable, especially when it is being driven by the two big political forces in this country. It is a matter of fact that you cannot wish away Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga as very two influential political forces living in our times right now. And therefore, in their minds and hearts, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has stated this as much, that the referendum is inevitable. And President Uhuru Kenyatta, while talking recently, said that if it need be that we can change a few laws here to make ourselves more better governed, then he would support that. And therefore, referendum is coming, especially when supported by these two major political leaders. Then I think that it is inevitable. And it is a byproduct that the question is.
All right, Omondi, you say referendum is inevitable. Let me ask Herman Manyora that question. Is there a genuine concern and a need to amend a section of this constitution, if not to have a referendum?
You know, constitutions are always amended. Those who argue against it would be advised, for example, to look at the US Constitution. In the first 2 or 3 years, it was amended 10 times. This happens all the time, and because it provides for that kind of thing. The Constitution provides on the amendment and how it can be amended. The question, like you ask, is there a need for that? If you remember when we were doing the Constitution changes around 2008, 2009, up to 2010, by 2010 it was agreed that this thing was good, we could pass it, but there are issues about it, about 20% we could address later. So strictly on the basis of that alone, that we gave ourselves this constitution knowing very well there were things about it that needed to be changed. On the basis of that alone, changes would be welcome. But secondly, if you look at the handshake, you cannot actualize a handshake without changing the constitution. So yes, there will be changes to the constitution. Some may be made in parliament. Some of those changes may require a referendum. But the important thing, and I want to share with Kenyans, is I think there will be a referendum. But I think much more than that, there will be another referendum after this referendum. That is when we shall get the referendum.
And all these
when in November last year...
Herman, at that point, the two that now you are talking separately of, what is their timeline in your own view?
I think there's going to be a referendum, well, hoping this COVID thing doesn't get out of control. If the coronavirus is contained reasonably, we could have a referendum as soon as in the next 10 or so months, basically before June next year. Of course, it depends on the situation in the country in terms of COVID-19. But I also think that after this referendum, there will be another referendum immediately after the elections of 2022, especially if Uhuru and Raila have their way in that election.
And what, in your view, will necessitate another referendum post the 2022 polls?
Correct. The idea is there are certain things the first BBI could not give or say. And when what BBI report came in November last year, I said, this is not the BBI report. And the BBI report will come. People say, so you see they went back to Party 2 and they are bringing us what they are going to call a BBI report. That will lead to what they will call a referendum. But the actual referendum will come after the elections. Why? Because there are certain things you can't tell Kenyans now. You can't tell Kenyans you are going to have a powerful prime minister, for example, for strategic reasons. If you tell Kenyans you are going to have a powerful prime minister and a president who is still powerful, then William Ruto could use that and bait Mudavadi. So you leave it to Watari. He can't use it to get Mudavadi or somebody else. Then Uhuru and Raila win the elections. Then post the elections, they now come up with the actual referendum they want that will bring the really changes that may include a powerful prime minister. Because after you lose in 2022, whether you are handshake or you are tanga-tanga, whoever loses the elections will be vanquished. It will take him long to stand if they will ever stand up again.
Herman,
so for that reason,
Herman, is it therefore the case that in your own preposition you view that President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga will be in the political scene actively post-2022 again?
If they were not there after 2020, what's the purpose of the handshake? Is there a human being in this country who can implement the handshake unless it is Uhuru and Raila? There's nobody. They can't give it to Ruto, he will not implement it. They can't give it to Mudavadi, nobody will. They said it's only the two who know our challenges, and it is only they, Uhuru and Raila, who have the answer to our problem, the problems that have bedeviled us and faced this country since independence, caused by their two fathers, and therefore they have undertaken, the two of them, to sort out that problem.
All
and
right,
therefore, if you remove them from the scene...
Herman, is that not a binary view that a nation of 47 million Kenyans who are rightfully thinking can be a nation decided and well thought of by only two individuals?
Societies are led by a small group.
Given.
This is always the political class is a tiny percent of the population of any country or any society. From that tiny percent, only a handful, sometimes just one individual, carries the day and calls the shots. If you are in a kingdom, the king is everything. I mean, if you are in America, despite the fact that the president of America is a straitjacket, there's so much the president can do. He has a lot of powers.
All right,
so in the political space that we call...
All right, I understand Javas Bigambo wants to contribute to this discussion. Javas, let me ask you the same question as well. Is there a justifiable need for a referendum?
You see, it is in the affairs of politics and men and women in any nation to determine how they want to be governed. And the decision of how to be governed comes through a structure of government or governance that is agreed upon by the people. And that can only happen through structured processes, and one of them is through a referendum. If the people of this nation indeed find it proper and fitting altogether that the fabric of governance that the Constitution is requires some kind of amendment for amelioration, for better governance, then granted, so be it. Let the people then be presented with the proposals and then go to a referendum. But I am diametrically opposed to the view of Professor Manyora, with all due respect, when he says, and I quote, that it is only President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga who know the problems bedeviling this country, and it's only those two men who can steer this country forward. Really? That's a very sad proclamation by Professor Manyora, because this country has got capable leaders, capable minds, etc. It will not take only Uhuru Kenyatta, who has led this country now by 2022, it will be 10 years, to steer this country further. He's done his 10 years, and other Kenyans are capable and can rise to the occasion and lead this country. And this country has got sufficient talent, motivation, and ability to steer this country further. If at all we're talking about inclusivity, then we must not disregard logic and talk about or have some leaders want to stay or grab and resist on the mantle of leadership as though that space of inclusivity has got a very narrow kind of understanding or definition. So even with this kind of referendum that is likely going to be proposed by the BBI report, should be a kind of referendum that makes sense to the people and to this country. Of course, I have got my own reservations, because when you look at the history of politics and governance and change all over the world, the moment change comes from top down, that kind of change does not have the primary interests of the people at heart.
You would rather want it to come from where to where, Javas?
True change always comes from the bottom up.
All right, Herman, let me ask you this question. President Uhuru Kenyatta, in more than 3 instances, has himself hinted at a constitutional amendment, a change. During the Madaraka Day celebrations, he said, and I quote, 10 years later, I'm already discerning a constitutional moment, not a moment to replace the 2010 constitution, but one to improve on it. During the CITAM 60th anniversary, he said, and this is the president again, and I quote, if there is anything wrong with the constitution or any other law, we need to sit down and see how best we can rectify. For a Kenyan who is watching this show, how will rectifying the law, rewriting the law for interests that are best known to probably those who are hinting the essence of rewriting the law, how will this serve Kenyans?
You know, that question has been raised by many people, including those who say that it doesn't put ugali on the table. It could be true, but I don't think it is true. You see, Moi used to say this thing, and we didn't even used to take it serious. You are not there, you are still a young boy. Siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. Meaning siasa mzuri, maisha mzuri. Politics is at the root of everything. If you fix your politics, everything else will flow. Because we have not been able to fix our politics, we are being faced with the problems and the challenges that other people sorted out 200 years ago. We are still living in the poverty that is shameful in the 21st century because we have not fixed our politics. So if you fix the politics, everything else flows. Because tribalism is there because we have not fixed our politics. Corruption is there and it consumes all the money that will go to schools, to healthcare, because we haven't fixed our problems. We haven't fixed our problems because we haven't fixed our politics. So for those who think politics is nothing, I want to tell them that they are wrong. Fix your politics.
And this politics in your view, and this politics in your view will be fixed by rectifying the law.
Of course, it's part of it. In other words, you use the law to make you do certain things in politics. Okay? This is a state that must be bound by laws. We are a constitutional state. And therefore, there is precious little you can do without anchoring it in law. So if the prevailing law makes it difficult for you to do certain things in terms of politics, then fixing the law is not a problem. It's not bad. You fix the law, you fix the politics. You see? And everything flows. The economy flows. Once you have a functional political system anywhere in the world, look at the world. Countries that have functional political systems have high standards of life, high quality of human life, because they have fixed the way they govern themselves. Because it's about how you govern yourselves as people. Once you sort out that problem, that every Kenyan knows he has a chance to become anything they are capable of becoming, like the American dream. If Abu Bakr can rise to become the president of this country without someone standing in their way, then you don't need to go to your tribe. Then you don't need to steal.
All right, and still on the question of rectifying the law and the constitutional change, isn't the question then that the interest of either whose interest comes first? Is it the people's interest or the politician's interest, Herman?
Let's be very honest with ourselves. It has never been my interest and your interest. In modern states,
interest of who?
It is of the rulers. My friend, look here. It is not in the interest. Uhuru doesn't do anything in my interest. Raila wouldn't do anything in your interest. They do everything in their interest. They are a political class. The state is a creation to allow a few people enjoy the resources that country has to offer. Whether it is America, it is a class of Americans who run America. It's a class of Americans who enjoy the resources of America. So they play politics in a manner that makes them enjoy those resources. So let nobody lie to you that a politician among these current politicians will come and lie to you they can do things in your interest.
You seem to be wanting to suppose then that a democracy is a caveat.
Let me finish, Abu. It is only when a revolution comes in that the interest of the majority is served. I'm not saying we need a revolution, but you look at revolutions, it is only revolutions that can convince me they will bring in changes that have the common man at heart. But all these other guys are playing a game that ultimately benefits them. What we enjoy are mere byproducts.
All right, I want us to move from the question of the referendum, but before I do that, let me ask Omondi one final question on this, and this is in reference to the cost of the referendum, should it be there. IEBC says, and I quote, as to the issue of how much we are informed by the cost of the repeat presidential election of October 26, 2017, which costed the country 12 billion shillings. With a referendum being one election, the cost could be similar or thereabouts. This is according to Chebukati. 12 billion shillings is not a few changes or a pocket money for this matter. Is there a need to have all this money invested for a referendum?
Thank you. I don't think there is need to have a whole 12 billion invested into a referendum because in as much as we need some changes in law, we don't require a referendum at the moment. And just the way my other panels have stated, when changes come from top to down, they normally don't involve the people. Mm-hmm. And just rope in a bit. If you look at what Professor Manyora is saying, that this handshake is going, BBI is going to procure, to save, is our politics is about bad manners. And all over the world, there is no law that can cure bad manners. Our politicians just have bad manners. If it is corruption, just recently, Honorable Aluke was convicted without the BBI and without the referendum, mm-hmm. which means that we have the laws to fight these vices. I agree that our constitution is not perfect, but this is not the right time to amend this constitution before implementing it fully. And therefore, I don't support roping in a whole 12 billion plus into such an exercise when we are heading into another general election and our people continue being impoverished, people continue being poor. And you see now we have come from a very unprecedented pandemic that has left most of us poor. So I don't support that.
All right, let's move from the question of referendum and now get to the Jubilee divide. And I ask this question, Herman Manyora again, from Moses Kuria, Alice Wahome, Robert Pukose, Fred Kapondi, Joyce Korir, Khatib Mwashetani, Victor Munyaka, William Cheptumo, Eden Duale, Murkomen, name but a few, who have been asked either from the House leadership positions that they were holding or the committee positions, the committees that they were leading. One will suppose this is a direct attack to the Deputy President's political wing.
Yes, it would look so, and it could be so, that these are aimed at disabling William Ruto. But if you intend to sweep your house, definitely there are some things that will have to go out. Some things you don't use, some things don't function well, some broken down items, you will have to throw them away in the dustbin and onwards to the litter people. So I think if Uhuru intends to clean the house, there will be casualties, like I've said before. Mm-hmm. And you begin with those that are, for example, irritants. And then you have to deal with the people who are standing in the way of you achieving what you want to achieve. Remember, being the president of a country is a big thing. The country is in your hands. The future of the children of this country is in the hands of one man, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Mm-hmm. To that extent, if he feels he wants to move, and there are people who are making it difficult, if not impossible, for him to move, definitely he will crack the whip. And when you crack the whip, you don't just whip anybody. You select those on whom the axe will fall. If it falls on Murkomen because he has too verbal, too noisy, then just so be it. And he may not like it, but unfortunately when you are sweeping the house, there are certain things you'll have to sweep out. So if the likes of Murkomen, and you saw how they reacted even after being removed, mm-hmm. you could see perhaps the person removing them was justified. But this is politics again. Everywhere in the world, politics is played in a similar manner. You constitute your cabinet, you are a prime minister somewhere in Europe. After 2-3 years, you see things are not moving the way you want them to move. You even sack the whole cabinet. It does happen. So the whip is always being cracked. The axe is always not far from the man in charge. So if Uhuru looks and sees things are not moving in the direction he wants them to move, there are certain things he will do. Among them is to de-whip certain members to remove certain members from certain committees and certain positions, to remove members of his cabinet from cabinet, to reshuffle them. Anything done within the understanding of the laws of this country, within the understanding of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, or within, as is the case with Jubilee, within the provisions of the party, with the party constitution, the Jubilee constitution, so long as it is aimed at making him achieve smooth running of his government, of his party,
all right,
then of course it will be welcome.
All right, let me bring Javas to the discussion. He has been quite quiet for some time now. Javas, there are words that have been used in the Jubilee purge, such as house cleaning. If one is to ask, where is the political dirt, or where was the political dirt in this Jubilee house coming from? What, in your own view, will the answer be?
Well, you see, some must die so that others can live. The handshake itself, for it to exist and make sense politically to the interests of Uhuru Kenyatta, to the interests of Raila Odinga, it had to have, or to occasion, various casualties. And Deputy President's politics and his stalwarts are some of the biggest casualties in this political affair that has conjoined Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta at the hip like Siamese twins. And the issue of cleaning the house, this housekeeping affair within Jubilee is just to make sure that they root out any form of political resistance to the interests, stuck interests of Uhuru Kenyatta and his legacy issues, and knowing that William Ruto, being propelled by the winds of ambition, could, in a way, together with his men and women, be a stumbling block and cause Uhuru Kenyatta's interests go into the head, into the winds. And that is why the issue of the purge or house cleaning had to happen. Because as long as William Ruto and his men, henchmen and women would remain entrenched, the efforts of Uhuru Kenyatta to steer his own interests, and you know, politics is about interests. It's a very selfish game.
Javas, you also talk of the question of the president wanting to leave a legacy. One would suppose the president didn't wake up in his second term to realize he had a legacy to leave. He served for 5 years and he had these members who have been axed, de-whipped, who are serving in his party, in the National Assembly as committee heads, in the National Assembly as leaders of the House.
You see, the president is now trying to pull his socks from around the anklets. And he had left his socks around the anklets for far too long. But you see, the issue of occasioning this purge is not so much to do with his development legacy in this country. Far from it. Because when these leaders, these men and women were in those leadership positions, was really not rolling out development projects across the country? Wasn't the Jubilee Manifesto and the Big Four agenda the issue that was guiding the Jubilee projects? It was. But this purge is just to ensure, as we all know, that when finally the recommendations of the BBI report are shaped into a bill that will need to be deliberated by the National Assembly and or with the Senate as well, all together as Parliament, that those leaders who have been in charge of these committees, who were opposed to this kind of changes, and all of them are aligned to or inclined to William Ruto, then they would offer some kind of resistance, even at committee level, because of course you know that committees in Parliament, that's where work happens before plenary. And so the issue of conducting this purge is not in any way aligned to Uhuru Kenyatta's development legacy that he is in pursuit of, but the issue of making sure that whatever proposals in form of a bill that will go to Parliament will not face any form of resistance.
All right, Omondi, is it a case then of President Uhuru Kenyatta selectively choosing who within his party suits best to drive his own agenda?
Abakar, we have to recognize that political leaders, just like any other leaders, don't lead in a vacuum. They lead in a setting called political parties, in most cases. And this setting called political parties exists with three fundamental virtues. One is discipline, two is loyalty, and three is faithfulness. Mm-hmm. A political party without discipline, loyalty, and faithfulness does not have any mandate to give its leaders authority to lead it. And therefore, when President Uhuru Kenyatta realized that after the handshake, which of course is when Jubilee died, it was going to be difficult to operate when his principal assistant was opposed to the handshake, he had to come out as a leader and instill some discipline. Now, the question is the purge that is happening in Jubilee related to the 2022 politics or Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy? Mm-hmm. For me, I think that the purge happening in Jubilee is related to 2022 politics and not to Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. Because we have had presidents in this country and all over the world anyway. President Uhuru Kenyatta, former President Daniel Moi Kibaki, did not have to tell us that he is going to leave any legacy anywhere. Mm-hmm. President Moi Kibaki just went down to work, and whatever President Moi Kibaki did, we are still singing them up to today. There is nowhere, to my recollection, where President Moi Kibaki went to a podium and told us that he wants to leave a legacy anywhere. So I think a legacy, you just need to work and give people development, mm-hmm. give people what they require, and then the legacy will come out by itself.
All right.
Purge that is.
All right, Omondi, fair enough, you have made your case. Nonetheless, let me bring back Herman to the discussion. There are those who read, and this is within the political circles, that the DP's troops moved first. They made their first step, and that step was made too early before the polls.
My name is Omondi Oluwande, not Owada, sorry, Oluwande.
Hello? Is that me?
Yes, Herman, I'm asking, there are those who in the political circles read that the DP's troops made the first move and this move was made too early.
There is an unwritten law or rule. It is hidden, yet it is hidden in public, that a deputy president or a vice president or an heir to the throne is a person who waits, rather sad, for the man in charge to die, then he takes over. It explains why many vice presidents across the world, people don't even know them. Mm-hmm. Many people don't even know who Mike Pence is in America. It is a position that is very difficult. It's a position where you are best if you are silent. Nobody exemplifies that more than Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. Mm-hmm. For 12 years or so as vice president, he was humble. Stories were told about him, of the humiliation he went through. Some even claiming he was slapped by some people. It may not be true, but the fact is that he was very humble. It's like you lay in wait, humble. Mm-hmm. So when you contrast this with what William Samoei Ruto has been able to do, then you find a very interesting situation where you have a deputy president actively campaigning to be president a whole 4 years before his boss leaves office. It's very difficult even for the boss.
Herman, you say a deputy president actively campaigning. It was the president to the run of the second term who publicly stated that he will serve for these term and allow him to serve for another 10-year term.
But that's not what we are saying. You see, the president called the Jubilee members of parliament to State House immediately after elections. And he told them, for the next 5 years, we want to do only one thing. We want to serve the people of this country. We want to implement our manifesto. No politics. When 2022 comes, I'm the one who will lead the campaign for William Ruto. That's what they tell us. So he didn't tell them to go on campaign. I think, on the contrary, the president has been open, publicly saying, let us suspend all forms of campaign, all forms of politics. Let's concentrate on delivering the people of Kenyans through the so-called Big Four, for his legacy and so on and so forth. But I think they have defied it, if what they do is anything to go by. So it is true, like you say, they have shown their hand too early. And I began by telling you the position of deputy governor, deputy president, vice president, heir to the throne is a very difficult situation. You are there and you are not supposed to be there. You see, even Machiavelli tells us, when you are with your boss, show him you are just a fool. If you show your boss, never outshine your boss. It's one of those rules of the 48 rules of power. One of them says, don't outshine your fool. Your boss. It's actually very obvious. And I think that is what our deputy president has done. Maybe it is his strategy. Maybe he knew if he didn't do that, they would eclipse him. So let's not blame him. That was his style. We are only commenting on that style and saying it came a little too early.
All right, Herman, I understand we are extremely out of time. Let me ask Javas this one question. Kenya has had 11 vice presidents, only 2 became presidents. That is Moi and Mwai. Those who did not become presidents include Jaramogi Odinga, Joseph Murumbi, Josephat Karanja, George Saitoti, Musalia Mudavadi, Michael Kijana Wamalwa, Mudi Awori, Kalonzo Musyoka, who still has ambitions to be one, and the current serving DP, who also has ambitions. What will it take as we conclude this discussion to break what has been termed as the deputy president's curse?
First, while you're right that 2 persons who've served as vice president before have ascended to the high office of president, none of them has ever been aided by his predecessor, or who was his boss. No president, when you look at the presidential history of Kenya, no president has ever made an effort to aid his deputy to rise to the high office of president. In fact, it was likely to go down in the history of Kenya, the annals of our political history, when Uhuru Kenyatta declared that he's going to offer his unlimited support to William Ruto. But now we see things have changed. I know not what is it in that high office that the holders of the office of president never really have any enthusiasm to fully offer generous support to their deputies to rise. But things could change. It will take, of course, the great confidence of the citizens of this nation in an ambitious person who is serving as deputy president to give that support to that person, if at all, of course, that individual, male or female, has demonstrated an untold patriotism, of course, loyalty to his boss, love for the nation, and values that are cherished by the nation. But then again, even though such persons may be ambitious, they may also want to temper their ambition with a bit of caution and ensure that other issues that are considered as vices do not bedevil such kind of quest.
All right, and as we conclude, Omondi is still with us, I believe. Omondi, your parting shots for the night?
Yes. My parting shot is that President Uhuru Kenyatta is living for his last term, and he needs to leave a united country, a country that is living in peace. And therefore, I just urge him to continue working on peace measures so that we enjoy the fruits that our forefathers were yearning for when we gained independence. Thank you.
All right, Omondi, a political analyst, Javas Bigambo, a governance expert, and Herman Manyora, a political analyst, as well as our residential guest for Pundits Night. Gentlemen, thank you for making time for us tonight.
Thank you, Abubakar.
All right, that is Pundits Night, the premier show of Pundits Night, a show that intends to more than just 13 discuss and explain to you the political happenings in the country. This show will be coming to you every Monday at 9:30 p.m., slightly after the news. And on behalf of the entire team that made this production possible, bye for now, but enjoy the rest of our programs.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease